So, well, I know there's a few people that are going to join us a bit late, with that said. So I am going to introduce Mike Bartlett. Mike Bartlett is the Assistant Vice Chancellor for the Division of Online Learning and Continuing Education. He's going to be doing the introduction. I'm Dr. Rebecca Gretz. I'm the Senior Online Instructional Designer, and I will be moderating this event. And Julia Martins is a instructional designer that works for us part-time, and she's going to be doing the chat. So feel free to put things in the chat. There will be a time after Dr. Palmieri talks about, does his keynote, where you can ask questions and answers of him and his experience teaching online and the pedagogy of going from face-to-face online. So with that, Mike said, with that said, Mike, I want to keep on schedule for people. So you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself and make.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. Hope you can all hear me okay. So yes, Rebecca mentioned I'm basically the ABC for online and continuing education. And this, as far as I know, is our first digital learning symposium at UW Oshkosh. And we're very excited for you all to participate. And we really appreciate you taking the time out tonight. I mean, this is late in the day, and I mean, it's the start of the semester. This, to me, is a huge commitment. So we really do appreciate you doing that. And the value of the digital learning symposium really lies in the faculty and instructors who are going to share the extraordinary work that they've done in online course delivery and development. And there's power in creating this kind of instructor community, particularly of those instructors who have excelled in the online delivery and also experienced the benefits of actually that development, also crossing over into how we teach face-to-face. I certainly felt that myself when I started teaching online back in 2007. I started with synchronous first. We called it a point-to-point delivery between different campuses. And I can remember teaching linear algebra. I'm actually in the math faculty as well. But then I moved into asynchronous, things like finite math and trigonometry, college algebra, all right, calculus 1, 2, and 3, all right. And it went on and on. But I also experienced very much the benefits of developing that delivery option and all the good things that the research has shown, and how we develop good online courses, and how that really spilled over into my other kinds of teaching modalities, face-to-face, hybrid teaching, which I also did, flipped curriculum, which I also did, and then I managed to connect up between the online and the flipped curriculum in using resources between the two modalities, and was able to present at a number of national and regional conferences on how you could actually leverage those kinds of resources in the both kinds of deliveries. So the benefits of the professional development in developing online courses that are innovative and engaging really does spill over into other kinds of modality. And so there was a number of things that I became passionate about when I actually started my career in education. One was access, and that sort of was born out from the fact that I spent the first 5 years of my career in two South Pacific nations in developing curriculum to move them up to the position where their students could then go into higher education. And through distance learning, I actually started my graduate work, but I went to part-time and then was doing a distance learning project as a graduate course. And it was in measure theory. And if you don't know anything about that, it's pretty heavy duty stuff. And I was doing this on a small island that had no communications whatsoever. There's no telephones. We had no internet in those days. And we had we only had a radio to the next island, and we had so the only option was snail mail. So I sort of understand the challenges of working in distance education and being able to access education through some sort of distance learning platform became very passionate about. The other one was to use technology to enhance learning, and that sort of went well with when it came on to online learning. So high quality asynchronous online learning and the innovation opportunities it provided, I became very, very interested in. And then the other thing that really struck me was particularly when I started moving into administration, having started as an instructor, what are the essential components, all right, that create a very successful and strategic online learning ecosystem, what I call an ecosystem? What are the things that really are important for that? And after 16 years of sort of beginning to start to try and actually starting to get a handle on what those things actually are. And one is very high quality course design. That's invaluable. All right. And that's why we've seen this really grow over the last, 5 to 10 years. Also, very high quality instructor professional development is really, really important because it empowers instructors to be able to deliver up to date and very high quality pedagogy. And that is really important. And a thing like a digital symposium is very helpful in that regard. Also, the proactive and student advising is a very key element to a very successful online learning environment. Recruiting and marketing initiatives, coordination, analysis and development, monitoring an efficient, appropriate and broad and deep curricular array. How you put the curricula together in an online learning ecosystem is vitally important. It's got to be broad, it's got to be deep, and it's got to be what students are looking for. And also coordinating, conducting market research. That's always very interesting. What is it that students are actually looking for? Which is one of the things OCE has done really well in reaching into the adult working potential student market. And then, of course, tracking the data metrics. I'm a mathematician. I like data. I'm not going to apologize for it, but we like to follow the data and see where it goes. And student engagement accountability measures is part of that. We want to see what is the engagement, all right, as far as students are concerned, and how do we infuse online learning innovation resources and coordinate the best learning technologies to help that engagement. And that's a very important question that we need to confront as a learning community. And that's one of the important things is, can we develop a instructional learning community? Really, really important. I know as online instructors, it can get really isolated at times. I was very fortunate. I hooked up with a professor of psychology in a former institution who had become an instructional designer. In those days, instruction design was pretty rare. But she had moved across into instructional design, so she was teaching and doing instructional design. So when I started teaching, if all of you who have been teaching online for a while know, you do not keep regular business hours, right? that just doesn't happen. And so I'd be online late at night, she'd be online late at night, and I'd shoot her a note and say, oh, you're online now, so we could chat about all kinds of things to do with the instructor design, what's working on her course and what's working in my course. She was in psychology, I was in math, but we had this really good opportunity to build a learning community between instructors, which I think is really, really key. And then, of course, there's a lot of external collaborations that we can actually put together as far as online learning is concerned. So that's, again, that's to say that this, to me, is really, really important. And I'm really, really pleased that you guys have all taken the time to come and join us. So I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, Dr. Palmieri. He's been teaching at UWO for 34 years. All right, lots of experience. And as a community-minded professor of communication studies, every class Dr. Palmieri teaches, he teaches intro to rhetoric and public advocacy, freedom of speech in the USA, history of American public address, the rhetoric of rock and roll. Now that sounds interesting, all right? Communication career capstone has something to do with becoming a better citizen. That is really so important. And as a recent participant in Quality Courses by Design, Dr. Palmieri realized that teaching face-to-face and online are not the same, but are two different pedagogies for teaching. All right. So please welcome Dr. Palmieri as he discusses how to build confidence in the online spaces. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it. And I want to thank Mike Bartlett and his staff for really all the great work they've done to move UW Oshkosh forward in this online space. I think what, Mike, what you and your staff have done has been really meaningful and dramatic, and hopefully we can continue making improvements. I also want to send a special shout out to Rebecca Gretz, who has been teaching the quality design course. And for me and many people who've taken it, it really was transformative. I'm someone, as Mike said, who's been teaching for a very long time. I've always taken advantage of learning platforms online, but it really wasn't until the COVID era that I, like many instructors, had to really try to learn how to teach online. And one thing that got me very curious at that time, and I didn't expect this, we kept talking about the amount of students who were getting lost online, that the loss of the face-to-face contact was having very negative impacts. And that was obviously true for some students. But what I found fascinating was the number of students that seemed to be thriving in the online space, which really challenged everything I thought about online education. And then taking, as I said, Rebecca's class was transformative. I'm gonna throw a few slides up here, and hopefully we'll all be able to see them. Okay. Not sure how to get it. Hold on just a second, please.
You can just click on slideshow right above. Yeah.
Yeah, it's being covered up by the Zoom stuff.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I got
Or
it.
at the
I got it.
bottom too.
I got it. There we go. Thank you very much. You would think I'd know this by now, right? Everyone, please feel free to email me or call if you'd like any further information from me about anything I talk about or any other issue. So what I'm going to talk about is a couple of things. Number one, I think we do need to welcome the online space. I do think there are many instructors, especially those in my generation, the baby boomers, and even the Gen X instructors that maybe did not have online experiences as they went through education themselves. I think there's still this tendency to think that online education is still kind of like a fad, and that eventually we'll go back to the way things were. I'm not sure that's a good way to think about it. Then I'm going to get into why we lack confidence in online spaces, at least from my perspective. And then building confidence in the online space. I'm going to talk about two different mindsets. And then there'll be an opportunity for some questions or comments. First of all, here's just a relatively current article from the Chronicle of Higher Ed. In the 2022-23 academic year, colleges largely restored their in-person courses after a lengthy pandemic-era disruption. Students, however, didn't want online and hybrid learning options to disappear, even among traditional age undergraduates. This is according to an annual Changing Landscape survey. It's done every year. I think it's a very credible survey. According to the report's authors, this growing demand for online and hybrid education has likely not yet reached its peak. And so the online experience is here. I think it's long past time for colleges and universities to embrace it and to try to help us to get out of the mindset that it is somehow something less than in-person education. It's here, it's not going away, it will be here. And I think for many years, I, like many people, were framing it as, okay, how do we make the best of a bad situation? What I learned in Rebecca's class and other places is that it really doesn't have to be a bad situation at all. It doesn't have to be either or. It can be the face-to-face and online can be both and, as we will see. Why do we lack confidence in online spaces? I guess it's always appropriate in Wisconsin to quote Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi said, confidence is contagious, so is lack of confidence. What I found for many years is that there was so much down talking of the online experience that even someone who might have had a desire to want to learn it might be frustrated in hearing such down talking, and then obviously lacking confidence as a result. Here, I think, are some common reasons why we lack confidence in online spaces. Number one, even though instructors are highly educated people, well, as we all know, even highly educated people fear change. Moving into the online space is something different. I started teaching as a graduate assistant in 1983 at Central Michigan University. So in a real sense, this is actually my 40th year of teaching. The majority of it was face-to-face. And you can see why people with experience in the face-to-face would fear changing into something different. I think all of us experienced that. Secondly, I think a huge number of people who are asked to teach online have never themselves actually taken an online course. And if they have taken an online course, their experience in it has not necessarily been positive. So what I've noticed in academia, if we look at the demographics of academia, you still have some baby boomers like me that are still kind of hanging on. They never had any online experience in their education. The majority of the Gen X faculty, people born, say, between 1965 and 80, they really did not have much online experience. The millennial generation faculty had much more experience with online education, but I've talked or spoken, excuse me, to many millennial generation faculty informally, and all of them tell me that their own personal experience with online education was mixed. Some of it was very high quality, where they could tell the instructor was highly trained, but much of their online education didn't necessarily meet that. So lots of people that we're now asking to move into the online space have not necessarily had a positive experience with it as a student. Another thing that hurt my confidence early on was that if we believe that the students are not prepared in the face-to-face setting, and of course that's been an issue for a long time, well, the same is true in the online space. And that lack of student preparation not only can be frustrating, but it also can sap our confidence. I know that when I taught online many times before taking Rebecca's class, I would always automatically blame myself for my students' lack of preparation, and often felt helpless, not thinking there was anything I could do to address that. Mike, in his presentation, mentioned the word isolation. I think what happens in academic departments, usually not everyone is 100% behind the online experience. And so for those who are, it can feel very isolating. In the majority of academic departments, I don't think there's enough give and take about what we're doing online, and that can really sap confidence. I think that there's been a lack of training, and I've heard that the quality design course may not be offered in as great numbers as it was. I mean, maybe Rebecca can talk about that later. But if anything, we really need to increase the online training. I know that for me personally, the quality design course made a dramatic difference. In fact, one thing I appreciated about it was on the first day, Rebecca asked us to write in the discussion board, what are we hoping to get out of this? And the way I responded was, I've taught online before, I can do it. I've gotten some positive feedback from students, but I've never really felt that confident about it. And then that course really helped me to figure out what it was that was impacting my confidence level. And then I think my last bullet point here is there really is a shortage of mentors in the online space. My experience over many years of teaching is that when new instructors come into an environment, I'm talking now about the face-to-face type of instruction, they really need mentorship, people that can guide them in what they're doing. And often the face-to-face mentorship is not adequate. I think there's a tremendous shortage in the online space. And I think we do need to make sure that people who are in the online space and are not necessarily feeling good about it do need to have someone that they can go to regularly, if only to throw some ideas off of. I consider Rebecca now to be my mentor in the online space. And I think we all need someone like that to build our confidence. So that's just my list of why we lack confidence. Obviously, it's not a complete list. I'm sure all of you listening may have your own ideas. Now, how do we build the confidence? I think that there are two mindsets. And the mindset on the left, I call it the brick and mortar mindset. This is a great article by Professor Laura Desfor-Edlis. It came out in 2012. I remember reading it at the time in the Los Angeles Times. And I've actually had students read this article many times over the years as we've had discussions and debates about the merits of online versus face-to-face education. And one thing she said in that article, that op-ed, which I would encourage you to read, that really resonated with me for a long time. She said, personally, I am dismayed that those of us, professors and students alike, who do not want to teach or learn online and who cherish the one-on-one interaction and non-virtual classroom experience are being made to seem like antiquated duds. Then she says, I love this metaphor, just as my mother was told that the modern way to feed a baby was not to breastfeed, I am being told ad nauseum that we just cannot teach like we have in the past. But I do not buy it. Breast milk is still, in general, best for children, and the brick and mortar classroom is still, in general, best for students. I think that our society, for the most part, still largely buys into the brick and mortar mindset. Certainly in K through 12, correct? Because we saw during COVID, the training for instructors in the online space was so inadequate in most school districts that it really fed into the brick and mortar mindset. I think in the college and university world, the brick and mortar mindset is still very, very powerful. And it took me a long, long time to figure out that it does not have to be either or. And so that's why I contrast the brick and mortar mindset with the course design and facilitation mindset. And until I developed this mindset, it was very difficult for me to build confidence in the space. Here's a quote from really a great book by Shannon Riggs called Thrive Online, A New Approach for College Educators, 2019. She says, good teaching does not spring naturally from a particular modality. A good course on campus is not good because of the location or traditional brick and mortar ambience. Likewise, a weak online course is not weak because it is delivered via the internet. Good teaching in any learning environment requires careful attention to course design and facilitation. You know, when I read that now, and I'm sure all of you maybe are having the same experience, it kind of seems like common sense. But the first time I read that, it was kind of like an aha moment for me. It helped me to realize how much weight we put in the modality. And I think, as Professor Riggs says, it's not really about the modality. In fact, you know, I've told Rebecca many times that one thing I loved about her quality design course is it not only helped me to become a better online teacher, but it also helped me become a better brick and mortar face-to-face teacher. So it's not the modality, it's about the design and facilitation. And then finally, let me just contrast what I see as the differences between these mindsets. In the brick and mortar mindset, the professor or teacher believes my online course should mirror my in-person course. This threw me off for years. For years, I told myself, I've got this great 14-week face-to-face course, and now I have to find a way to make sure that my online course exactly replicates that 14-week brick and mortar class. But the course design and facilitation mindset is the movie is not the book. They are two very different things. Obviously, my online course is going to have a lot of similarities with my face-to-face course, but certainly not 100%. And that's okay. It should be different in very meaningful ways. Secondly, the brick and mortar mindset, and I hear this among many of my colleagues, if given the choice, I would most likely choose in-person instruction. I think for many, that is still held up as the hierarchy or at the top of the hierarchy. The course design and facilitation mindset is, I am comfortable teaching in multiple formats. It's perfectly fine to have preferences, right? But I want to reach the point where I am perfectly comfortable doing either and not placing them in a hierarchy. And finally, I think the brick and mortar mindset is deep, meaningful connections with students are more likely to occur in person. I hear this all the time, that yeah, you can do some great things online, but if you're going to have a deep, meaningful connection, it's going to happen in person. The course design and facilitation mindset is online courses require meaningful connections with students. This was another aha moment for me, that until I'm working hard to create a meaningful connection online, it will forever be this kind of distant experience that seems like something less than in person. And so, you know, for example, when I taught a 7-week, 100% asynchronous online class last semester, I didn't know what to expect. And what I discovered in the first couple of days is, and it takes a lot of time, but I had to have fairly frequent one-on-one Zoom call meetings with students. And it was a small class. I think I only had 12. Well, that became really deep and really meaningful. I got to know those students in a way that I often don't get to know usually I teach classes of 26 in face-to-face. So I urge people to think of these two mindsets and try to reflect on what we can do to move into the course design and facilitation mindset. Rebecca had us read this really great book, Small Teaching Online, that has really helped me quite a bit, not just because of what the authors talk about, but because of the sources that they cite that I've also consulted. I will end right there, and I would love to hear any comments or questions or concerns that you might have. Thank you very much.
So you can put your questions in the chat, or you can just raise your thumbs up if you want to ask Tony a question about what he's experienced, and we'll just go from there. We have one clap. Thanks, Kimberly.
Thanks.
Awesome. Those who have taken quality courses by design, could you just say one thing that you took from the whole experience from going face to face to online? I'm just curious, because there's a few of you in here who've taken that course. Ooh. So Tony,
So
Oh, I see a question in the chat. What's an example of making connections with students in an online course besides the Zoom calls? Great question. Couple of things that I did, and again, especially when you're new to it, it can take a lot of time. If you have discussion boards in your class, as the instructor, you have to be actively engaged in those discussion boards. If we leave the discussions out there for the students to just converse among themselves and we just kind of like monitor it to make sure they're doing it, that does not build engagement with them. So I think that the students greatly appreciate when the teacher is providing his or her insights into what's going on. So that's one thing. Another thing that I do is in the face-to-face class, I use the Kahoot quizzes. And some of you are familiar with the Kahoot. It's a good way to get students to use their phones and technology in the classroom. And I have found that those actually translate well online. So I've had them do those. So those are some simple things. I also find that having people, I learned this from Rebecca, talk about things early on. Like I remember, Rebecca, no teacher had ever asked me before this. I think your question was, describe yourself at your best and right, and at your most challenged. And so now I have students respond to that, and that allows me to really start a dialogue. So the answer really is, it's not really building the connections online. The meaningful connections are not really that much different than face-to-face. It just takes a little bit more time and work. The other thing, and I also learned this from Rebecca, if your class is asynchronous, you do have to make time that can be kind of like an open office hour time that students can tune in. And it can be, I think, Rebecca, what you did is you would have maybe like a morning session and an evening session. Mm-hmm. So I did that with my students, and that worked out really, really well. An opportunity for them to discuss anything they wanted to.
So what Tony's talking about is I have an take a survey. It's a pre-survey course, and then to ask questions, and not only the instructor and the students see that. So I asked, that was one of the questions that I had is, what do you like at your best? What are your worst? And then every week there was a weekly reflection. So students could share what they learned and what they really struggled with, or if they were experiencing personal things that they needed help with, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Paul had his hand up at one point. Do you want to make comment, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I totally had the same experience as well with creating meaningful relationships, and I mirrored, because I was teaching this summer in asynchronous online right after taking the OCE, and I tried to mirror the weekly get together or optional class period, as they were kind of called, for students to buzz in as well too.
Yeah.
And do that. But I think strangely, even though it was asynchronous, because of all the little hacks and tricks and cool things in Canvas that I learned, they knew that I was more engaged in the course, and I felt that kind of, it didn't look like I slapped my course together in 2 seconds, I guess is what I'm saying. And that created a connection with the students in a way that they knew I had spent some time crafting it, and that I was also listening to them and making an effort in the discussion boards and in those reflections that I also had them do, making a very solid effort to make those connections as well too. And they nearly all responded as well. So
Awesome.
Thank you so much for that. And I agree. When I taught my asynchronous class last semester, I asked the students to describe for me the positive experiences they've had with online courses and the not so positive. And they almost unanimously said that the negative experience was when the professor showed up on the first day or two, and then we didn't hear or see from them again. Because as we all know, it's possible to create an online course that can go on autopilot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that is really disengaging for students. Wendell asked the question in the chat, how was your movie different than your book? That's really a great question. I'm in a field, communication studies, that does lend itself to studying a number of different types of texts. So I'm able to always throw in lots of video, lots of audio, and I did lots of that. And so I guess my movie, if I call my online the movie, is I tried to make sure that the students were being stimulated with multiple senses, because as we know, university classes can be very print text heavy. And I think especially in the online space, if all we're doing is throwing them nonstop print text, I don't think that that's motivating. So I like to throw in as much short video as I can. If I make video lectures, for example, and I learned from online designers here on our campus that if you're going to make video lectures, the worst thing you can possibly do is make one long video that goes on for 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes or an hour.
Yeah.
So even though it takes an incredible amount of time, if I have, say, a 40-minute lecture I want to make, I try to make short 5-minute segments. That way they can watch 5 minutes at a time, go back to what they want. You still don't get enough viewership, but you'll get much more viewership when you've got short and to the point video. Great question, Wendell. Thank you.
So Mike, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just making sure that we got all of the questions, and then I had a comment. But someone said, I think Wendell asked, how was your movie different than your book?
Yeah, that's what I just responded to.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And Michelle posted something. I think this is amazing. It really is. That your presentation was brilliant, and it sort of brought me back to my own evolution of that. All right, mentorship, so important. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something we need to move forward with this at UW Oshkosh. That was one of the reasons that helped me a lot in the beginning. I said we had that other instructor who became an instructional designer. She was a full professor of psychology, and you know, we could interact. Okay, we're both at work at the same time late at night, and we could bounce ideas and suggestions off each other and things like that. And unfortunately, she's passed away now, but that was a really enriching experience of that relationship between instructors. And also, you know, good teaching is good teaching. That's all there is to it. It doesn't matter what the modality is. And this is just a brilliant presentation, Tony. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Mike. And I really appreciate it, especially coming from you. And we do need to do something about the mentorship. I don't know how we do that, but I will always appreciate Rebecca, because not only is she a tremendous instructor, but she makes herself available long after you've taken her class. And I think all of us need to get into that ethic that I'm here for you. Right? And
Thank you.
if I don't know the answer, I can find out, or at least try to find out. So thank you for cultivating that kind of mindset, Rebecca and Mike. It's very valuable.
So with that said, I'm going to introduce Matt Hammers. He's the next presentation. So Matt teaches chemistry. He has a bachelor's in business administration and in chemistry from Eau Claire, and he has a PhD in chemistry from the University of Oregon. He participated in cohort 6, and he designed an online chemistry course. There were 2 courses, Chem 101 and Chem 102, and they mirrored each other. So Matt's going to talk about his course, and you can share your screen, whatever you want, Matt.
All right. Well, thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, so to provide a little background and context, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
All right, great. And so Chem 101, Chem 102 are pretty high enrollment courses. They are required of all nursing majors. I think Oshkosh probably puts 200 to 300 people through the 101, 102 sequence every year. And my involvement with the class started about 2 years ago. To add a little personal note to it, I was at lacrosse, or I was an instructor at UW lacrosse and became engaged. My now wife was over here on the east coast of Wisconsin. And so I was leaving my position, hoping to find teaching work at a college university over here. And so I guess you could say I cold called, emailed the department chair in chemistry asking if they had any teaching needs for the next year. And they said they were designing this new online course sequence and thought it might be something that I was interested in. And so it always will hold a special place in my heart because it was really what allowed me to get my foot in the door here at UW Oshkosh. But so at the time it was pitched to me as a course that was targeted towards people who are taking this BSN at home program, individuals that were already working in the healthcare workforce, but looking to continue their education and get a bachelor's in nursing degree. And so this was a fully online program that they were in. And I think at the time they had to go to like UW Green Bay to get their chemistry courses figured out. And so Mike Foley in the department developed the 101 course last fall, and then I followed up in the spring, last spring with the Chem 102 course. And Mike had a really good idea that it was an interesting idea where for presenting the content for the course, it was just a collection of short YouTube videos. All of the content delivery was via YouTube videos. And one of the best things coming out of COVID was so many people in academia started just developing all of this really good content and sharing it. And a lot of it had really high production quality. In addition to these like online tutoring programs and whatnot, they were producing content of their own. And so there's just so much good material out on YouTube. And like Tony was saying, a lot of them are in like little 2 to 3 minute chunks, or I think the longest video that I had up there was maybe 10 or 15 minutes long. And so students could just bust out like a chapter's worth of videos in an afternoon, or they could watch a few short ones in between doing laundry and taking their kids to soccer practice or whatnot. And so I collated about a library of about 160 videos for the course. And I'll share my screen now and give a snippet of a few of the videos, because there was three main goals that I wanted each, like one of 3 goals that I wanted each video to have. The first goal was like an overview type video that immediately caught the students' attention, got them interested in the chapter, and previewed what they were going to be doing. And you get to know these channels and these characters on YouTube that have just like really great videos. And one of them that I used quite a bit was called Crash Course. Has anyone ever heard of Crash Course? They've got like 15 million subscribers at this point. So it's not a small operation by any means, but they're really awesome. And so I think I'm not sure if the audio is going to come through if I play it on my computer. So just let me know if it doesn't.
When you share screen, right at the bottom, if you click on share screen once again, right at the bottom, there's an option to share computer audio.
Like the share sound button?
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. So I'll just play like maybe 30 seconds of this video, but you get an idea. It's like snappy, he's quick-witted and whatnot.
It's just beautiful, isn't it? It's mesmerizing. It's double helix sighting. You really can tell just by looking at it how sort of important and amazing it is. It's pretty much the most complicated molecule that exists, and potentially the most important one. It's so complex that we didn't even know for sure what it looked like until about 60 years ago. And so multifariously awesome that if you took all of it from just one of our cells and untangled it, it would be taller than me. Now consider that there are probably 50 trillion cells in my body right now. Laid end to end, the DNA in those cells would stretch to the sun not once, but 600 times. Mind blown yet? Hey.
Yeah, so it goes on, and there's animations in here, and he talks a lot about the basics of DNA, but they go pretty quick, so you wouldn't want to use this video as like the source of main content for the students. But they really do a lot of good overview. Is that TikTok star Hank Green? It might be. I'm not actually sure what this guy is. I think it might be Hank Green. If you recognize him, it probably is him. And so the second like main type of video that we had, I put in there was just more like routine content delivery. And those range from sources like Khan Academy, which I'm sure everyone is probably aware of, to like literally just like grad school postdocs that were posting videos and then ended up having like thousands of followers ultimately. And so like a Khan Academy for like nomenclature of how to name chemical compounds. And then this guy, his name is Joe Chem. He's got a lot of videos out there that are interesting enough.
Luckily in OChem, oxidation for all intents and purposes for us, when you oxidize a carbon, you make more bonds to oxygen. It's as simple as that, which is really great, right? Because when we're learning a lot of things, the simpler we can make it, the better. Am I right? Okay, so let's just look at a simple alcohol.
Yeah, so it's engaging, it delivers the material. This is a 9-minute video, so it's probably one of the longer ones. And that's how they got most of the things that they would like take notes on during the course of the week. And then really the third goal that I wanted to provide through videos was Chem 101 and 102 are Explore courses in USP. And so I wanted to just pull in like general interest videos that had to do with things that we were discussing in class. And a lot of them were maybe like National Geographic videos or like a Discovery Channel type special. It's like, for example, this one on the ozone layer.
But the ozone layer has gotten thinner. Chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, are the primary culprits in ozone layer breakdown. A CFC is a molecule that contains the...
Yeah, so just kind of like back in middle school when your science teacher would wheel over the TV and then they would show a short video and then you'd go on from there. And so that was really the main instruction or content delivery method for the course. The other biggest challenge for having a lab science course online is what are you going to do with the laboratory? And I think that's probably, especially for science courses, that is the main obstacle for putting a lot of our content in via the online delivery modality. And so what I did is I went through a third-party integration with Canvas, a third-party company that is called Labster. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Labster, but they've got well over 100 different simulations that you can do that range from 10 minutes to half hour, 45 minutes. And during the course of the semester, I put together a list of 27 different simulations, like safety, polymers, synthesis of aspirin, the Sudan test, just whatever we were talking about, there was always at least 1 or 2 or 3 different simulations that I could put in there. And while I certainly don't think it's a one-to-one substitute for an in-person laboratory science where you can never replicate something not going as planned and having to troubleshoot it, or realizing that this glassware is hot and I should probably let it cool down, or physically setting up an apparatus like a distillation apparatus. But it does allow students to engage with the material in a different way, and they are interactive. I made a short little demo.
With the click on the part where you can find the end product of the distillation. You found it. Okay, so you're heating a homogeneous liquid mixture and its components have different boiling temperatures. Which component will we see first in the collecting flask? Brilliant. The component with the lowest boiling point will evaporate and condensate first. When we're distilling.
Yeah, and so I got a lot of good feedback about Labster. I think people enjoyed the simulations. They were varied enough that I don't think people found it boring or anything like that. And I think supplemented the rest of the content of the course pretty well. Lastly, so I think we've had a lot of comments about how important it is to be present as the instructor. Is there an extra charge for students to Labster? Yeah, so I think it was, I can't remember exactly how it was, but it was about about $100 for the semester for the students. And so in terms of being present as the instructor, I mean, it would be really easy to not be present since I'm not actually delivering any of the content on my own. And so the biggest thing I did was just had weekly reflections that all the students did, and just tried to like comment on every single person's reflections and have like a back and forth type dialogue through there. I did have some office hours, but I didn't really get any people stopping in office hours virtually. Let's see. I think that was the majority of what I had. I did have a few like feedbacks that I could share about what students gave. So one was, being a commuter student, I was very appreciative that the subject was offered online this year. It was greatly benefited me. I believe this course and the material acquired the ability to participate in online simulations, and the fact that it was online had many benefits to me. I felt I made progress in the class, and that doing it online was just as beneficial as attending in person. I found the YouTube videos entertaining this week. They all contain chemistry information, but I like the focus on medication and how they came to be, and pharmaceuticals and things like that. It wasn't all positive. In my end of semester comments or whatever, if being prompted with what could the instructor do better next semester, if he actually taught, it would be better. He used Crash Course and YouTube videos as the primary sources for learning for highly difficult chemistry concepts. The professor did not teach. The way this class was taught did not make my tuition costs seem worth it for the semester. And so I think you're always going to have comments like that when you're doing it that way. So for what it's worth, you can't please everybody, but I think a lot of students really enjoyed the YouTube videos. So that's all I had for you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about my Chem 102 course.
So I do have a question. I know there was some conversation about assessments. So if you, and I don't know if you noticed, but when Matt was showing his course, he had prerequisites where students had to watch the videos before they can get to the next one. And did you do midterms and finals in this course?
We had we didn't do any midterms or finals. We had like a long 30-question quiz for each chapter. And so they were getting bombarded with substantial quizzes so that I actually didn't have any exams. But they had to at least click through every video. I mean, you can't really see whether they watched them end to end, but like when I was going through them, I watched them on 1.25 speed just to get through them a little more quickly. And I'm sure that some of them probably did that, I would guess.
So did you see any difference in the grades? And of course, you only taught it one semester online, but did you see any difference in the grades between that and your face-to-face students possibly?
Actually, students really did pretty well in the class. Actually, this fall is the first time I'm teaching 102 in person. So I've taught 101 in person a couple times, but I don't have a 102 in person. The Labster labs are very easy. So I would imagine that the lab grades might be not quite as high for the in-person labs, but I'm not sure.
Awesome. Are you going to be using some of this material to supplement your face-to-face course?
Yeah, I've already brought in one or two of the videos in to show in class up on the projector, change up class a little bit.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions for Matt and how he designed his course? I did put in the chat the cost of the textbook Labster and how many credits. I actually presented on this at the Affordability Symposium in Stout in April on this whole concept of this course and how much cheaper it was for students. I mean, they had 9 credits, but the materials that they have it was not expensive at all. So
Yeah, I just make one comment, and thanks, Matt, for that great presentation. Now they're really great resource materials to give you a class to really dig in. The great news is that they can watch them over and over if they sort of miss something, right? And but you brought up an important point, is that students also have varying expectations in online learning. So sometimes it's not a matter of that you can't please everyone. It's the fact that they don't really have correct expectations about what they are going to experience in an online learning situation. Again, it comes back to what the Tony also talked about, is that sometimes instructors have the mindset that, well, we're just going to put the face-to-face class online and be the same. Well, a lot of students think, well, it's an online class, it's just going to be the face-to-face class delivered online. And so I think we have to work on ways to manage those expectations as well. I think it's getting better year after year after year, but there are still a lot of students, particularly when you have adult students who may have gone to college, 10 years ago. Well, it's a lot different now, and they're still having a similar expectation to what they had back 10 years ago. So I think that's something we can also work on, is, okay, how do we educate students on those expectations?
I think one of the surprising things that came is the first Chem 101 was taught, and Mike Foley was like, this isn't going to work with enrollments. But the second Chem 101, by word of mouth, more students enrolled in Chem 102. So it was really a successful project, and they went from one to another. They knew what to expect. It was the same students who took the second part, along with other people who were interested in it. So awesome. I think it is time. We're right in schedule. I think we can either go on or take a 5-minute break. All right, are you ready, Paul? So
Yeah, I can go.
I am going to introduce Paul Sager. Is it your last name, Sager?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to be sure I pronounced it correctly. Paul teaches writing for UW Oshkosh. He has a master's in fine arts with creative writing, with an emphasis on creative writing from Columbia College in Chicago. You've been teaching at the UW system for over 13 years, system-wide in various spots, and you also participated in cohort number 8. And Paul took a different way of approaching AI in his courses and writing. So go ahead, Paul.
Well, thanks, Rebecca. And again, I really did enjoy your course. It was really very helpful for doing this. But, quite honestly, I had started teaching online well before I took your course. So, with slight regret, I look back at some of my other courses that I was doing and saying, I felt thrust into the online environment before I had the mentorship, before I had the teaching, which is a very difficult thing that many teachers have had happen. And as a result, they're soured on it. It's like, because they're expected to do more than they could. But now I feel like I have the tools do that. And one of the things that came up in the spring of 2023 in a lot of the department meetings, and I also am a CAP liaison, so I deal with and oversee the high school teachers, is AI, and specifically Chat GPT, which is a chat bot and technology that can quite simply put, with simple instructions, create writing that is at a fairly high level, depending on the instructions that are given. And it was shocking. I mean, to say that it like shocked us as writing instructors is potentially an understatement. Now, a lot people were scrambling. I'm like, what are we going to do? Do we have to have this AI policy? What are we going to do? There was AI detection software wasn't quite there yet, so people couldn't know. I actually did, because in my face-to-face classes, I tell my students that I'm going to read everything they write, and writing becomes a fingerprint. And as a result, some of them changed in the spring from what they were writing. And I'm like, that's quite interesting. Without getting into too much depth or going into the plagiarism issue itself, it is something that students often want a shortcut to their diploma. And my courses are a hoop that they have to jump through. Not a choice, a hoop. And therefore, I think they're more likely to use things like AI to do their assignments. So getting out ahead of it is hugely important, and recognizing it. Interestingly, for the Writing 287, which is the advanced writing course that I taught and redesigned for OCE, at least a third of the students had never heard of it whatsoever. They were completely in the dark about what AI was. They were busily getting their degrees. Many of these, I had students from Saudi Arabia, from Illinois, these are people who were, doing their lives and not necessarily looking for any new technology like AI to do their work for them. On the other hand, others had. And it was a very interesting discussion at the very beginning. And I'm just going to share my screen and kind of show you how I designed things so that you can kind of see it. But I did approach it in an interesting way, I thought. Here's my course that I did, WRT 287. And a lot of these wonderful things at the beginning are things that I learned in OCE that really have helped students get engaged in the course. One thing is, the readings that you have to do, readings and videos are always here and listed. But interestingly, and I thought I was pretty clear about like what I'm doing. So I also give them this article like, is your education overrated? Thinking about the value of their education is an important part of this course. So that's something I have them think about as well too. But then moving into week 2, we start to think about, okay, where do you draw the ethical line with AI as a result of reading, this article and then responding in a critical reading? What are their connections between, the value of your course and potentially your degree being undermined by the fact that AI can now do what I've been trying to teach you how to do. So that discussion, those readings and videos, I talk about the writing process. The writing process is something a lot of students struggle with. It's time consuming. A lot of them are very disciplined in doing it, but when procrastination becomes a factor, and I'm sure nobody procrastinates though, right? Like we all do it. Like I could be, part of me as I'm here is like, I could multitask and grade a couple of things with speed grader here, because Rebecca taught me that like I can have like a comment in there that recurs if it's something. I can time management is important, and thinking about that, because that's a major reason why they might result in using AI. Not just to test it out, but because they feel, as many of us do sometimes, pushed to the limit. They're either overextending themselves, they're prone to break A lot of them are taking online courses, not because they're non-traditional students working full-time. One of my students in this OCE course had 3 small children, the newest of which was a newborn. He was working 50 hours a week and he was trying to do my class. And it's admirable in a sense, but obviously overwhelming. So the likelihood of AI usage is there. And I just wanted to kind of get out ahead of it. So eventually what I did is I came out in discussion 5 and said, okay, after learning all the things that we've done, let's talk about, like doing what would happen if I give you a book reading assignment. I want you to do a reflective essay on this, the last lecture, which is an inspirational book about someone who faces his mortality. And then there's an essay that I want them to write like that, something inspirational. If it was you to leave something posthumously, for what would you do? And a lot of them struggle with that. They're like, look, just give me a 6-page double-spaced essay with like this stuff and I can do that. Don't ask me to be creative. So this was something that I'm like, okay, let's see, interestingly, how AI would potentially deal with this. And in the discussion that I created, I did a Kaltura capture, which I hope it kind of comes up here. It takes a minute usually to load. This is a Kaltura capture of me using AI to generate. I copy and paste the assignment guidelines I've given them, okay? And then I go down and I enter them into ChatGPT, which I give them links to as well here too. And it spits out this essay, Embracing Change, a Journey of Personal Growth. Change is an inevitable part of, I mean, you can scan this. This is written by AI, okay? It has specificity. I was arriving in a foreign country, stuck by the stark contrast between home and new environment, like meaningful conversation. Like you can read through this and it is quite good in a way, but that's not the part of the discussion that was important to me. I give them my rubric on the assignment here, which is a somewhat basic rubric. And I say, okay, I want you to grade it. All right. Tell me out of the 20 points, how well did it follow MLA guidelines? How well did it have the length, grammar, punctuation, mechanics? To the person, they gave it 20 out of 20. They're like, wow, this is an amazingly written. It doesn't really have any grammatical mistakes, the punctuation, mechanics, length, all that's good. But here it shows a clear understanding of the assignment guidelines, using the last lecture as inspiration, has a clear point thesis, relevant body paragraphs that relate to the thesis, and this use clear personal examples as evidence and basis for the essays through anecdotes and stories rather than a general explanation. Now, the personal examples, and I don't want to read the whole thing. They're general and strange, and they're vanilla, and they don't really add up in a way that makes a huge amount of sense in this essay. But like, for example, through volunteering at local school, I had the privilege of interacting with children who had faced unimaginable hardships, witnessing their strength and resilience in the face of adversity served as a humbling reminder of the power of the human spirit. Well, that is not specific. Like, that is not a scene, that is exceedingly general. You need to tell me, like, I met a person named this, like, and go into a story. Tell me a story, give me an anecdote, give me specificity. And when we had this discussion in the discussion board, they were able to, about half of them say, it didn't have that. Like, I don't think it was what you were looking for, because it didn't effectively grab at the heartstrings in an emotive way, because it didn't have a specific thread to it. Now, Randy Pausch, who wrote the last lecture, died of pancreatic cancer, and he was exceedingly specific in many of his stories and anecdotes about his football coach, was teaching him the value of fundamentals, like about how his wife interacted and dealt with the fact that he had a terminal diagnosis of cancer, and how important, things that were not general. They were very specific, and AI can't do it. Can't do it yet. It tries, and often it comes up with, if you ask it to cite things, it'll come up with what are called hallucinations. It will cite works that don't exist. I didn't ask in this essay because I wanted it to be reflective. But those are just some of the things that, like, getting out ahead of it. I didn't want to say you can't do it, but I told them I'm going to AI proof my course. You can't really ask AI to do a discussion board because I'm going to know it. It feels vanilla, well written, grammatically correct, but still it lacks the breath of life that good writing has. And they were able to concede that, and I didn't get. And luckily, Canvas has turned it in, and Turnitin it in has an AI detector. And AI detect, usually it comes out 0, 0, 0, 0. But there are occasional things where it's like, oh, this could have been written by AI. But it's always a percentage. It doesn't really come back as like, yep, AI written or not. It's still trying to figure it out because AI is that good. It's constantly learning, but it's predictive. It isn't really intelligent. It isn't really human. It doesn't have a soul. It is just predictive software that thinks about what the next word might be. And based on its calculations, it puts it in there. So it really helped this course come alive. I think you're going to find that students will be using it in ways. I'm not going to outlaw it. I say students can, and in instances like this, to help potentially brainstorm, and that's something we talked in OCE. It can help with certain writing tasks, but it will not, in many ways, produce the type of writing that my expectations were in WRT 187. It just simply can't do it. So that's a good thing, you know, as AI proofing my course, which is great, but also dealing with the reality of AI, which is here, and it's here to stay. Again, it's like, online learning, is it here to stay? Absolutely, of course it is. AI, is it here to stay? Yeah, not going away. We're going to have to figure out how to pivot a little bit, how to use it, and I think that'll be important. And it has been important for me moving forward with other classes as well too. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thanks for sharing that. It's fascinating to me. So I actually have a paper subscription to ChatGPT. I decided that I use it for daily, and I also have a plugin called Ask the PDF. So I can take the content from a textbook, like the PowerPoint from a textbook, put it inside Ask the PDF. It will generate learning objectives, course outcomes, little snippets. And I'm designing a course, and the instructors looked at this course. One says to me, and he goes, "How did you figure out how to do this content? It's exactly spot on." And I'm like, well, and then he didn't really want to know. He just wanted to know what the content was in the course. So I had week 1 done, and it's an online course. So I said, you need to change your functionality from not being face-to-face, but a totally online course. And he was just me, and his mouth was just gaping. He goes, my God, every week has something in there that's exactly what I would teach in the course. So again, it's a tool that could be used for instructors as well, to write learning objectives, different types of content that comes directly from the textbook. Julia, you have a question?
Yeah, so I had 2 things. First, to comment that I am an instructional designer, and a lot of instructors come to me and say, well, how can I just get my way around AI? And usually I tell them to step away from writing, which is definitely something you cannot do. So I will say, well, ask your students to draw a concept map, ask your students to record a video as a submission, but I guess you're stuck with writing. So I love how you embrace that and kind of just took the hoops. Another thing that I have found that some teachers find useful is use tools that will integrate with Office 365. So use collaborations, or instead of Turnitin, use the external tool with Office 365. Why? If students are using AI, they're copying and pasting. There's paragraphs don't come at a time. The entire thing spaced it out. And then we can check version history and see how long that pace took. So that's another thing that I learned, but we're all in this battle trying to detect and It was an amazing presentation, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's something that has come up a lot, is how can we find it? And that is the way. Primarily in high school, where a lot of, like I said, the adjuncts that I'm liaison to, they're seeing their students try to get away with it regularly. But they do that through also, they can have control over how a draft is going. They can see how it went. And if all of a sudden a draft is created, it was done by AI. And I joke with them though, and I'm like, I need AI to do my grading because that's the bane of my existence. But I don't, because that's one of those meaningful connections. It's super important for me to let them know that I read what they write and that I'm giving them, I'm doing that. And I give them video feedback. And that is something that, especially in an asynchronous course, to be able to, because sometimes even typed comments, they take as too personally, like, this is what you need to fix. And they're like, oh, I suck at writing. And that's not the case. I can diffuse that in a video by saying, look, here's some things I saw that I think you can work on for the next assignment. It's much more positively based than something to say like, this is what you did wrong, why you got a lesser grade. It's more like, here's how we can build into the next assignment here as well. So I haven't done that. I've been kidding them because I'm like, grading for an English professor, it's always, I can't give them, too much true false. But yeah.
So Mike, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, wow, that was a great presentation, Paul. And it really does raise some necessary discussion points regarding AI for sure. It's not going away, so we're going to have to confront these things. And I too tried ChatGPT, is that what it was, when it came out, to write a document I was working on, and then I read the document. I said, "No, I don't think so. I don't think that's me." And that's machine, right? I did teach software engineering at one point, and I said, this is a machine, right? And so, but I'm just wondering now, with someone brought up before, some instructors who come into online think they can set up their course as an automated course. I had an instructor do that probably 5 or 6 years ago at a different institution, and it became obvious to the students at that time, and so. We had to say, look, I'm sorry, this is not how you teach online, right? Just set it all up and let it run, all right? Now I'm thinking that with ChatGPT, how long is it going to take before we have an instructor set it up so we have AI teaching the class, right? And that's something we do not want to happen. We want the kind of interactions that you're producing in your class. That was a great presentation. Appreciate it.
So Mike, that is happening there. I think Khan Academy is launching a new tool where the whole course is being taught by AI, which is really mind-blowing. But our students go out into the workforce and they're expected to use this. I was listening to a podcast on NPR and how HR people are putting resumes in through ChatGPT to find the similarities. They aren't using Boolean research anymore. My oldest son is a professional. He works as a corporate purchasing manager. He was told he needed to start using this to define and make his writing a little bit more smoother, but also to research and disseminate, is this true fact? And he said it's been a very powerful tool, especially for him who has a writing difference. And he's like, he's just finished his master's degree in organizational leadership, and he used it for one assignment. And it was a really interesting discussion between him and I about how to use it. Is it cheating? Is it not? Is it a copyright? It's not a violation of copyright, because a violation of copyright has to be written by a person, and ChatGPT is AI, so it's not a violation. There's just so many little, I could go on about this forever. It's a fascinating subject. And Paul's shaking his head. So Paul, are you going to continue to use some of these assignments in your next time you teach this course?
Oh, absolutely. I thought it was really, the discussion board, obviously for that one was unbelievable. And watching the students interact, watching them talk about where that moral line is drawn. Does it constitute plagiarism? Is it an original tool? Is it more of a tool than a fabrication, like in a plagiarism sense? it was really, because we're at the very tip of what this is. I think the discussion is extremely important, but I think you're absolutely right as well too. It isn't going away. It is something that in many instances can be a massive time saver. As far as some of the I don't want to say mundane tasks, but it's geared towards certain ways of doing things and can do it actually quite mind-bogglingly fast. I mean, you know, I'm Gen X and I'm looking at it going like, wow, this is pretty amazing. So I look at it with awe, but also, you know, I'm trying to teach the students to value what it is to have that human, like Michael said, that's not me. That isn't me. It's written well, but it's not me.
Yeah.
It doesn't have my essence in it, and that's something that's super important as well.
Right. That's interesting. So I did have this discussion with my oldest son when he was doing his last 1 credit for his master's degree. And I said, did you use ChatGPT? He goes, yeah, I learned a lot. And a lot of it I didn't like, but I learned some new things. Then I went through and edited it and made it my own. And then we had the conversation about critical thinking. How is this going to affect people with critical thinking? And I said, well, my grandchildren, what do they do when they don't know an answer to a question? They go, hey, Alexa. I said, there you go. And then he went on to say, as somebody who has a learning difference, it took him 8 years to get a manufacturing engineering degree. And he said, if I had this tool then when I was in college, my first round, my bachelor's degree, my life would have been totally different because I struggled getting started. And once I got started, I was fine. And I taught him how to use DragonSpeak technology when he was in 5th grade. So he had the tools, but it was the getting started part. And he said, it's a tool that I'm going to continue to use in my career and teaching others to use it as well. And as we look at our students, making sure they understand that some of the tools that they're learning now, they may be required to use when they go out in the workplace for various things. So really good presentation. So we're right in schedule, even a little bit ahead of time. I can actually start right now. So the next session is on internships and how to use Canvas for internships. And Shannon Sadowski is the one who teaches internships for human services leadership. However, she's really ill. And I met with her yesterday on Zoom and I'm like, yeah, you are really ill. So I'm going to do the presentation with her notes and explain to you, what she would present. So in the Human Services Leadership Program, there is a large requirement for internships. There's the HSL 325 is a 120 hours internship. And then you go on to have 2 other courses that are field courses. And then you have a senior seminar. And she set up her course. She has the same design, but multiple sections. One's for 8 weeks, one's for 14 weeks, one's for 7 weeks, one's combined. So I'm going to actually demonstrate, I'm going to show you her course from a student perspective. So you can see it. So this is the student view. And as you can see, I'm going to move my bar up here a little bit. She has it set up the same. So each one of the internships courses are set up exactly the same. So when students go from one course to the next and they have to do a sequence of 4 courses, they know exactly what to find. They know exactly where everything is. They don't have to muddle around and figure things out. She has her welcome and introduction. Again, if you've been through quality courses by design, this is the layout. I know there's quite a few people who have not been. She has a video and talking about what this course is about. She has a course tour, meet your instructor. This is about her personally and what she does. She has her course tour. Anybody who's taking quality courses by design or teaches for OCE, there's a course tour in every course. So it's a video telling the students where to find stuff. And for students, it's really a great thing because it's the same thing all the time. Again, she has her syllabus here. She has a downloadable printable syllabus. But as I go through this course, there's one thing that really stuck out that she really it's made a big impact. Tell me about yourself. This is a quiz that students take to tell them about themselves personally. But the biggest takeaway, which Shannon said, if I go to the home screen, is this check in with your instructor. So in this 14-week course, there's many things they have to do. They have to sign an agreement with their internship people. They have to do check-ins all the time. Every week they have to do something to earn points. And she's asking her students to do a video and build upon the video. So every time they go to the course, they have 2 tasks every week that are really important. They have to do an instructor check-in. And for her, this is a confidential information between the student in the internship and her as the instructor. And she said this is this summer and this fall is the first time she's ever used this tool. And it's been amazing because students are coming forward with problems they're having in their internships, and it's getting taken care of right away, instead of waiting until they're 14 weeks or 10 weeks into the course and coming back and saying, my internship is not working. How do I take care of this? I have 280 hours for the 400 sequential courses. How do I do this? So she said this has been the biggest impact with her teaching, is having students do the check-in, and then she can start working with her students right away on how to resolve those issues, whether it's a personality conflict, whether it's a joy that they're finding in their internship, and how they've really figured out this is the field they want to be in. So that was one thing that was really beneficial for her course design, and she uses it in all the courses that she teaches. The other one is she has videos, and every week, introduce yourself with the video, post a title and the agency and how many hours to date. The discussion replaces 2 hours of bi-weekly course, and she does a video herself. So every week the students have to go in and do a video of what they're doing. Here you go. And she wants students to do the video and then reply to 2 of their peers. This the video needs to be about 5 minutes, and they must watch 5 students' videos and make comments to 5 other students. So they are actually interacting in the course with them, and she's going in and interacting again, as Tony said, in the discussion boards. And it's made the internship part of her course of this program really amazing, because all the documents are here. She's communicating with her students. And for summer, there were 2 students in the 8 week. For fall, there's 6 students in the 14 week. For the series, the 400, 420, 21, and 422, which is 280 hours total. That's a lot of internship hours. There is a total of 9 students as well. So they're all in one area, and she's working with them all together on how to use the internship, how to navigate through the internship really quickly. She has an opportunity for students to Zoom if they want. But one thing is I need to point out, and that's something that faculty don't understand, when you have a repository for Canvas, it's archived for 7 years. So if somebody goes and does their internship and there's a question, well, did they actually do the hours? Instead of doing the email or paper trail, which you have to archive paper in your office for 7 years, it's on Canvas, and they can go through and check that to be sure. And I'm not positive about HSL, but this is, I'm positive it's a requirement to graduate. And I think that really may come up to be an area of question when they're applying for a job. Well, can you tell me where your internship was, what documents you did, how many hours you did? It's all inside of Canvas. So that's how she's using internships for her program. I'm not exactly sure which other degrees needed internships on campus or not. She did take this cohort in cohort 8, I believe. I don't know if Mike and Michelle can answer that question. I'm just kind of filling in.
I don't know the exact number, but there are a lot of different programs, undergraduate and graduate, that require different types of hours. I know there's one in particular that I teach that requires 30 hours of shadowing a personal trainer. So this would be a great way to keep track of everything, that then I don't have to have all the paper copies. Documents can be signed. It can be confidential between the instructor and the student. This is a huge way of keeping it in Canvas, which is awesome. I wish I would have known this sooner.
So when I worked at a different institution, an instructor was not doing that with her finals and midterms. They were all paper. And she said, every year I take a box down to the shredder. It's been 7 years sitting in my office. I said, really? She goes, yeah, so I have 7 large boxes in my office. And every year I just go through and shred them. I said, well, if you save them in Canvas, and her response was, nobody ever told me that. I said, yeah, it's archivable, it's researchable. You can go back and have the Canvas LMS administrator extract those documents if needed. So, Michelle, hopefully, if you do that course again, you will use it for that.
You know I will. Way
That's a joy.
easier. Way easier.
That's the joy of doing course design. I mean, learning about Canvas, and again, I'm always there to help anybody with Canvas moving forward, or even, yeah, people know that, and I tend to answer emails at weird hours if people need help. So I went through that kind of fast, and we're way ahead of schedule. I don't know if you want to just keep on moving along or take a break, or
One of the things about that's interesting is that, you know, a lot of times people say, well, we've got clinicals, or we've got internships, or whatever that is, and we can't teach the course online. But there are a lot of innovative ways to do it, and they still do those real life clinicals or internships, but it's still all tracked well within an online course.
yeah, it's, you know, when I was working at a different institution before I came back to UW Systems, they were using Canvas for tracking all their clinicals, and students had to check in that way, and I was able to document it and actually prove that they were doing their work that they needed to do. So it's just another innovative way in how to use Canvas. We all have Canvas, and I think there's so many interesting ways to use that. Once Shannon took the first course, she revised HSL 325. She came back to me and she said, can I have 4 more blank shells? I'm like, what? She goes, I want to design. My other courses are all exactly the same. So again, she has an 8-week, 14-week, another one with combined courses. And we've had multiple discussions on how to make them consistent, because it's really frustrating for a student to have to go into a course that should be all the same and not be able to find things. She did say her experience with students has gotten amazingly better. And the students are saying the same thing. So. All righty. Does anybody have any questions about how to use internships? You can reach out to Shannon if you want. Her last name is Sadowski. She'd be more than happy to help you or talk that through with you as well. She is actually, I didn't really introduce herself. I just jumped into it. She has a BS in Human Leadership and an MA in Professional Counseling from UW Oshkosh. And she was a graduate assistant as well when she was doing that. And she has said that's helped her understand going through the program, and then going on to her master's in counseling, and how to work with students and to help them, coach them. How do you deal with really tricky situations on a work setting? Because an internship is really like a work, you know, and helping her students navigate some really tricky questions like how to deal with somebody who's LGBTQ and that they work with in the situation, or how do I address my boss? Is it Mr., Miss, the first name, last name? How do I ask them that? Just simple little things that have made a big difference in our course with teaching. So I think I'm going to just move right along because Carrie is here, and Carrie's going to do the next presentation. So Carrie is part of the Reading and Studies Skills Center for Coles. That's right. She has an MA in Reading and an MA in Educational Leadership from Northeastern Illinois University, as well as an MED from National St. Louis University. She was in the first cohort in October of 2021, and she worked with Julia back then extensively on how to design her course. And she teaches critical thinking and writing for the Liberal Studies program for OCE. So thanks, Carrie. I'm glad you made it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I came right in when Paul was talking. It's been great. I had 2 children in different locations this afternoon. So my husband and I were both required. So I apologize for coming in late, but I am Carrie Jaco Rodriguez, as Rebecca said, and I work for, we used to be called the Reading and Study Skills Center. We are now, we've changed our name with the new CLO building. So we are now the Center for Reading Engagement and Academic Development. So the kind of the idea of skills is sort of, that term has kind of changed, and it's no longer really in the academic support division, not as popular of a term. So I have been working with OCE teaching since 2016, spring 2016. And during that time, I've been teaching LS 209 just about the whole time. And in fall of 2021 is when I took the quality course design the quality course design online course with Rebecca. I think it was maybe one of the first groups to go through that. And it was really transformational for me in terms of thinking about how I design a strong, effective online course. And I struggled because I had been teaching this course for like 5 years, and I felt like I knew it. I was just going to kind of like make a few adjustments and be done. And it turned out that I didn't finish by December, like that was our deadline. I worked into January because I really just like started from scratch. Like my idea was I was going to retrofit my current course and kind of put it in there. And I soon realized as I was going through the course, like that's not the best approach. And what I thought about and I learned is I really need to go back to kind of that backward design that I even had learned many years ago, in curriculum instruction when I was a graduate student. And I started sort of with the bigger picture in mind, right? So I used that design model that I learned in the course, and I began by kind of prioritizing learning outcomes instead of prioritizing topics that I wanted to cover. So previously I had started kind of like each week there was kind of a theme, and then there were like these, learning opportunities for students, and they were different, and some of them I think were very good. It's just that everything after I went through the course with Rebecca started to feel like a little disjointed. And if it felt disjointed for me as the person who kind of created the class and was facilitating it, it surely was disjointed for students. So that's when I realized like I can't even just try to retrofit this. I need to kind of like rethink the whole thing. And so I started kind of at the course level, and I worked on my own. So this is like before the days of ChatGPT. I came up with learning objectives, right? And I had taught the course, so it wasn't like I had nothing to go on, but I came up with those learning objectives. And I started there, and then from that sort of course level, I broke that down into we are a 7-week course, and so we have 7 units or modules. I call them modules. So I broke down those course objectives into 7 modules or units by week, and then I thought about what I wanted to see, what I wanted the students to learn and to be able to do for each module. So then each module would sort of build up to address the overarching course learning outcomes or the learning objectives for the course. And so that was just a whole new way of thinking about things. Before I kind of worked with topics, and I had I had all these articles, and I was really just topic focused. And then the learning opportunities for students, the activities and the quizzes and the discussions and the papers, all were sort of around those themes, but they weren't really connected to starting with what I really wanted them to learn and be able to do within each unit, and then within or throughout the course as a whole. So I want to kind of just share my screen so that you can kind of see what I did. And then the other side of that, once I get to the screen, is that I realized that I needed to make all of this apparent to students. And this is what Julia helped me with a lot in January when I finally got to this. Was for every single learning opportunity. So every single discussion, every single paper, every single quiz, every single activity that the students completed each week, I included which learning objective at the module level or the weekly level that activity or that assignment addressed, as well as the course level. So that was a whole new way of thinking about things, right? Was just really trying to first design it around those objectives instead of by topic, and then really work to make all of this clear and apparent to students so that they see the focus, the purpose, and the connection of everything that they're doing. So I'm going to attempt to find my screen here. I think I've got it. Oh, this is not it. I think this is, sorry, this is the outline of the, let me try it one more time. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to screen share and get my, I have it open, but
I can see it, Carrie. I can see your student view from your course.
Okay, I can't see it.
Oh.
Weird.
Carrie, is it on another screen? Are you at 2 screens?
No, I'm on one screen. Okay, I see it now. Perfect. I've got it. Thank you. Okay, so there's my student view. And so the beginning is standard, right? With you know, the start here and then the helpful resources. So if I just share week 1, and so I start every week with the objective and the overview and the learning objectives for that week. And so there's just a little narrative on what we're going to do, and then a list of exactly what the objectives are for that week. So clarified for the students. So in week 1, they summarize and paraphrase parts of sources, and then I list, you know, the rest of them. And then when we get to the actual assignments, including all the reading that they do, I have the WLO after with the learning objective. So WLO number 1 and number 2, right? And so for every single reading assignment, for every single you know, what they actually do, it tells them after that which objective it addresses. So the week WLO is the weekly or the unit module level learning outcome or learning objective, and then the CLO is the course level. And so each week at the beginning, those are listed, and then when we get to the actual work that they do, it's also connected there. And then on the next page is the you know, the assignments and discussions, and for each of those I also have the weekly or the module level learning outcome and the course level learning outcome. And the course level outcomes are listed, they're not, you know, listed weekly. And when I looked at this and when I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to say tonight, right, about the work that I had done, I thought that for the future, as I continue to work on this course and as it continues to evolve, it might be good if I can have a page with, you know, each week's learning objectives and sort of hyperlink those. So like after discuss, and I have them listed here, I could maybe hyperlink them so the students could click on that and actually see, you know, without having to go back and look what the objective is for, you know, WLL 1, 2, 5. Because if they don't have them memorized, or they, you know, they have to kind of keep shifting pages and going back to see what those are. So that might be something that I work on in the end. To kind of try to make that more apparent to them. So I might be, you know, working with Julia and Rebecca in the next couple of weeks to see if there's a way to kind of do that, because the whole goal is really just to make things more clear and apparent to students so they understand the connection between all that we're doing in the course and their learning, right? And what the purpose and connection is in all of the work that we're doing in the course. So that's and then each of the weeks kind of follows that same pattern, where it starts with kind of with an overview and a narrative about what's happening that week, and then a list of the objectives for the week, and then all of the readings and videos connected to the weekly learning objectives as well as the course level, and then the assignments connected to the weekly learning objectives and the course level learning objectives. And the course learning objectives are in the syllabus. And that's another thing is it may be, sorry, I did not want to download that. It may be a good idea to somehow connect that somewhere other than in the syllabus. I mean, have it in the syllabus as well, but also kind of have that so that they can link to that or something within where those parentheses are and everything is listed there. So that is really the work that I have done with LS 209, and it really it just changed my way of thinking about the course and thinking about how I design a course. And so after I worked with LS 209, and it's an evolving process, right? Like it changes almost semester to semester, not drastically like it did back in, you know, winter 2022 before spring 2022, but little by little. And there are things, but it's just changed my way of thinking about how to set up a course, particularly in the online environment, but just in general as well. Beginning really with a focus on what I want students to know and be able to do as a result of the course, and then of each week, and then how each assignment that I create and each activity that we do connects to that. And so you've taken what I've learned and I've applied it in some of the courses that I've also been working on through my own unit in the College of Education and Human Services.
So Carrie, you designed your course with weekly learning objectives and course learning outcomes exactly the way QM is required. It's required in Quality Matters. And I'm a Quality Matters peer reviewer, and that's the first thing that's missing. But I never said that was Quality Matters. You just did it, which is really amazing. That seemed to be a little bit more natural for what you're doing. And you had Julia, she was really amazing to work with as well. So as you go on, by thinking of having that mindset, it's a really good quality course. And if it ever did go through a QM certification, which is for 5 years, it would pass very quickly because you have the course map already laid out and how everything aligns and connects with each other. So thanks for all that hard work.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's really been transformational just in my teaching in general, to stop thinking so much about stringing together activities around a topic and think more about the end result and really put that at the forefront, and then work backward to kind of get there. And then of course, making that apparent to students.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that clearly is what makes a quality online course, right? And that's brilliant job. I really appreciate it. That was a great presentation. The consistency through the course design is very evident from every presentation.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
It helps those students for cognitive overload. And I will just mention too, Carrie has everything connected together and aligned. For students who really struggle with learning differences or are autistic, they need to know why they're doing something. And if they don't know why they're doing something, and 1 course out of 5 doesn't have that in there, they're going to focus on the negative aspect and not the positive courses. And it really affects their learning. And that was really evident when we did the autism awareness workshop in April. We had a student who was an MC, and he for the event, and he was autistic, and he was very clear that it ruins everybody's learning experience if you have a learning difference and those aren't connected. So awesome job. Does anybody have any questions for Carrie? All right, I'm gonna just move along because I know people are probably getting hungry. I keep on seeing my husband walking by my window in my office. Like, are you done yet? So
that's the only downside to virtual is we can't have food together, right?
That's okay. So the next section Julia is going to do, and she's going to talk about Canvas credentials, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Julia. Julia Martins, Bobber, I don't know how to say your new last name. So to me, she's Julia. She's an instructional designer for OCE, working for us part-time. She also works at Canvas as a Canvas learning specialist for instructors. So she's professional, working internationally for Canvas, and she's an instructional designer for ATEX. And ATEX is an online CETL office that offers instructional design services. She earned her BS in biology from UW Superior, and she switched careers after being a work study student in CETL and helping faculty migrate from D2L Brightspace to Canvas. And for me, she was my work study student, and I'm really happy to see her progressing so quickly, doing such an amazing job in her career. So she's going to talk about Canvas credentials. So go ahead, Julie, take it away.
All right, perfect. Let me go ahead and start by sharing my screen. Move this up here. All right, perfect. So I want to focus on Canvas credentials. This will be a very brief presentation. If you would like to set credentials out, work with badges, gamify your course, I am more than happy to meet in an individual case, go through the setup and work together one-on-one. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, Rebecca, thank you for the introduction. Thinking about Canvas credentials, what are they and how can we use them inside our courses? So Canvas credentials used to be called Badger or Canvas badges. So there is a little bit of an exchange within the term. So when we're thinking about Canvas credentials, we're actually thinking about badges, which can also be called micro badges, micro credentialing, and a number of different names for what we would be using inside our courses. Essentially, we would be finding either badges or credentials in our course navigation menu. So right in the menu where we have home, announcements, modules, we would be an item right there that can be enabled, or if you're not using it, it's most likely hidden at that point. This tool will give us an opportunity to gamify our course and add a little bit of an engagement tool, right? Gamification can be totally on the student's part. So we can have that students will mark things as done. Students will be responsible for completing the tasks and rewarding and marking things as completed, viewed, or done. Or it can be tied in to a specific score or with a submission. So we can be as flexible or as rigorous as we would like in that sense. The important thing is that we're always using that module structure, which obviously from the presentations we have seen today, we're thinking about that module structure. We're using the template, having that weekly structure will just make our lives easier. All right. So start by talking about the module idea, right? So how do I structure that module? Badges and credentials in Canvas will always be tied into the module itself. So as you can see right here, I have that students must complete all items within this module. In Canvas, I can have that students must complete all or students must complete one. And then for each item I have inside my module, being a page, a discussion, graded or not, an assignment, a quiz, I can have an action item, right? Those action items could be to view. So as long as students open that page, open that assignment, that would automatically be checked off. Mark as done, which students would then manually have to acknowledge that that is a done indeed. So they will have a little check mark right next to the next button. Submit. So if it is a graded activity, graded discussion, graded assignment, or a quiz, so graded or ungraded. Or the score at least. The score at least tool would be tied in with the score, obviously. But the one thing that I would keep in mind, if you want your students to, as soon as they complete the quiz, they can move on, little things like that, the score at least tool is usually easier and most practical if tied in with a auto grading quiz, right? If I do the score at least with an assignment, students are stuck in some sense there until the teacher comes in and grades that student. I do mention that stuck in, especially if you are using prerequisites, like I do have in this case. So using requirements, prerequisites to set course flow and kind of force students to move in sequential order, for example, or complete, mark as done, submit, or score at least a number of different items right there. All right. Well, how do I do this specific setup, right? So how do I add these requirements? How do I add the restrictions? I can easily go into the 3 dots for each module, and in that view, I would be able to play with those tools. All right. Keeping in mind, the badges, the credentials will always be tied in with the module itself. Now, thinking about the badge itself, the setup. So we started with the modules. My modules are already in place, which is part of my course development, and then going a step ahead, adding the restrictions, adding the requirements, adding the prerequisites. Now, time to focus on the badges, right? As the first time you open your badges or credentials inside your course, it will ask you to verify your account, make sure you are the teacher. So if you're not the teacher on that specific course, you won't have this specific view. Considering that is the case, I have already confirmed there is the 2 authentication. You get a code to your email, all that fun stuff that we're used to. And then I have 3 tabs, 1 for progress, 1 for leaderboard, and 1 for setup. Obviously, if we're working from scratch, we want to start with the setup. In the setup area is where I will be able to create my badges by clicking on add badge, and I will be able to place those badges, associate the badges with a certain module. All right. So in this space, thinking about the setup and then looking at badges, I will be able to assign and associate a certain badge to that module. The badge itself can be created right here. It will ask you what the title of the badge is, a little bit of a description. You can either make a badge with some of the tools that they have available or bring in an image, whatever is easier and works best for your course. These steps are somewhat easy. It's very user-friendly, easy to navigate. If you need any assistance, again, feel free to reach out. As the setup is done and I have that association, I can go into the leaderboard. The leaderboard is also part of the teacher view. And in here, I can rank, I can see the rank for my students. I can see who has completed the most badges. I can change the rank, see if I need to reach out to one student, reach out to the other, see what's going on, check out some details, check the timing, if they just came in here and then work through the badges, if they are doing it in a certain pace, doing it weekly by week, how is that going about? And in progress, I have somewhat of a similar view where I can actually swap between badge progress. So looking at which badges are being awarded the most. So maybe students have found that this badge is easier to earn than that one. How is that coming about? Or I can check learner progress, which will then give me a list of students. And from that list of students, once again, indicating which badge was earned. All right. So let me actually open this specific course and I can show you what it was done in this case. So I created just a simple course. It's very, very basic where my students just need to mark something as done, meaning they have the cake that I want them to bake. There's the cake ingredients, and then I want them to just mark the recipe as done, right? So they practice, they're good to go. Easily, they can click on that check mark and it would be marked as done. From the student's point of view, so if I do student view, you see that as I use the requirements, prerequisites, students can see those action items and the teeny tiny circles right here. These circles will indicate if that module, that requirement, that prerequisite has been completed. So if I come right here, for example, I will see the mark as done. And if I go back to home, you see that now I have a check mark in the item itself. And once that was the only requirement for the module, I'll have a check mark for the module as a whole as well. All right, and that can be used throughout the entire course, attached to badges and credentials or not. So that's just another tool that can be used. All right. Go ahead and leave the student view for now. Take a little bit. All right. And then I can check that credentials area. If I am using credentials inside my course, I would highly recommend making that item available to students. So having that move to the top list in your navigation items. And here I would have those options, those tools that I mentioned. I would have the setup, the leaderboard, and the progress tab. Everything can be done right here. I don't necessarily need to open a new tab. I can if I would like, but a lot of times it's just easier to stick right here to the course. All right, so you see that I'll be able to see all of my different badges. I can check my learner progress. I can see here that Neville has not completed anything just yet. Luna, same thing, but Luca has earned everything and they're good to go. All right. If I go to the leaderboard, I can see here in a rank at this point, everyone else other than Luca is just tied in that bottom area. And then under the setup, here's where I would be able to find each module. In this area for the badge setup, the module names will automatically come in here for you. So you can just add that badge and link to a module itself. All right. With that, I also wanted to show what students see, right? Students will be able to see what we call the backpack. Essentially, they will have access to the badges they're earning, even past their enrollment. So if they access that credentials area from within the course, they will see the badges they earned for that course, right? So if they're looking at it locally, they will only see what happened within that course, which it's perfect. They would be able to see how many badges they have earned, how many badges are in the course, so they can kind of balance that out. List of all badges, they can expand, see details, they can share, and so on. All right. Another thing that is important to note is that these Canvas badges, Canvas credentials can exist and be opened outside of the Canvas course. All right. In that case, I do have right here the ability to just look for badger.com and I can log in with the exact same credentials I use for my course. And in this space, I will be able to find a backpack. In the backpack, I will be seeing badges from everything that I have taken with this account, right? So in this case, as Rebecca mentioned, I am part of the instructor team. So I have here a few badges for different trainings and different things we have used. So I have the ability to check all of that out. The same will be true for students. So if they have taken your course, but the course ends this term, maybe they want to go back and see what they have earned in a few years, they can check it right here. If there's an expiration date, it will show an expiration date and so on. But they do have the ability to look for those badges even after they don't have access to the course, they don't have access to Canvas. Perhaps they're not a student anymore and they have already graduated. All right. Perfect. So I wanted to be brief and leave time for questions. As a reminder, I am a part-time instructional designer with OCE. So if you would like to have a talk a little bit about Canvas in general, badges, requirements, modules, a number of different things, I am a little bit of a Canvas nerd and I am happy to help.
I love that you're a Canvas nerd.
It's true.
So I do have a question. Is this actually integrated into Canvas, our instance at UW Oshkosh, or is that something that we need to promote?
I have it in my courses, but often I do just check in with Brian.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I need to know. If we're going to move forward with this, I think we need to really make sure that it's up and working.
It is free, so that's one thing that is good to note. At this point, we are using the free tool. And that's what I demoed with.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. That was great. And I think I echo what maybe it was Paul, I think, who said that, wow, there's so many things in Canvas that we don't know about, right? And I think this is one of the ones that we can see some innovation that we could actually do in. So that's very informative.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions about Canvas credentials? Again, if you have any, if you want to use it in your course, reach out to Julia. So Mike, we're about we're ahead of schedule a little bit. But do you want to close up, just wrap things up, and we'll get on?
Absolutely, Ma. I am always blown away by the expertise and the innovation and the smart things that instructors do. It's just amazing. This is amazing presentations, and I had a list of notes here, and if I can find them, I think everyone touched on things that are just spectacularly good. All right, and everyone had a different perspective, and I really was impressed by the consistency of it as well. And presenting on an AI thing, I mean, this is so timely because we do have to have some serious discussions about this. It's not going away. We've got to know how to deal with it. And we found some great things about we can move forward with, like mentorship, and the fact that we've got to get the word out there that regardless of modality, good teaching is just good teaching, right? And the thing about online learning, I think also that came out about this is that online teaching is really work intensive. I think anyone who's teaching well online knows that it's work intensive, because it's a lot more one-on-one with students quite often, and with meeting with students, whether it's on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform we were using. And you can make those connections in such great ways. In some ways, I can remember that I had a student in calculus that I don't know how it came up. When you do introduction stuff, you introduce yourself, students introduce themselves, and you can tell I'm a native Wisconsin, right? And anyway, the student picked up that I was not a native Wisconsin, and started talking about all kinds of things, particularly a book he had read about the Second World War and things like that. And we had a great discussion outside of the actual mathematics of things. And that's where you can still build these really good relationships with your students. And it was not a whole lot different to the face-to-face, where you build good relationships with your students in face-to-face classes. Some of those things are just important for education. The delivery is just not necessarily the driving force. What we want to do is innovate so that we can maintain those very high touch important pieces in the learning environment, and to build students up and to help them reach their educational goals. So I like the idea too that I learned that the hard way, the 5-minute videos. Yeah, I started off doing video, 40-minute lecture. Now, really, people, they look, we probably don't have an attention span more than 15 minutes, right? How we can have students have an attention span of 40 minutes. So that was a pretty key one of breaking them down to no more than 10 minutes. So yeah, such great presentations. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing this. I think we probably all learned something from each other, which I think is really what the objective of this is. We're doing some sort of survey so we can get some feedback on some things that we could do moving forward. That would be great. Maybe there's some things we haven't thought of. Maybe there's some things that you'd like to know about as well. Certainly badging is going to be moving forward. I think this is one of the areas that is going to be vitally important. I'm also on the Wisconsin Online. There's going to be what's called Wisconsin Online, which is a system-run initiative. I was on the initial task force, and now I'm on the implementation team. It is not the system trying to take over online. They're trying to assist all campuses to move forward more robustly into the online market. And one of the task force, well, there was 21 recommendations or tactics that were actually presented to the system president in a way to get UW schools a greater share of students in the online space, because we do lose a lot of students to outside institutions because UW system's been a little slow in adopting the online modality for students. And as we know, what really is a traditional student anymore, I'm not really sure that we can put a clear definition on that. And so, we can have 18-year-olds now coming out of high school, going straight into the workforce, and then doing online classes to get their degree. Does that constitute a traditional student or a non-traditional student? I don't know. All right. I've sort of given up trying to define what we mean by a traditional student. We're in a totally different world right now. It is not going back to what it was. And we might as well get used to that. But coming back to the tactics, one of those tactics was micro-credentials. We are going to have to get into micro-credentials, into badging, certificates, and so forth. And we need to do it as quick as we can and produce very high quality badging and certificate work. And the other one was, of course, which is what OCE has been doing for a long time, is one of the, and probably a leader in this in some of the, in the UW schools. When I did part of our task was to do an inventory of all online courses. These were fully asynchronous online courses. And one of the leaders there was in 7-week classes. One of the tactics that the task force came up was compressed sessions. This is what students are looking for. All right, they can concentrate on 7 or 8 weeks, do it one at a time if they need be, but that allows them to also finish in a timely way when they're going for degrees, particularly for the adult working students. They can bite off 7 weeks. And one student said to us, well, I can do anything for 7 weeks. All right. So, when you got kids and, you're dropping off kids at school, or you've got babies, and you're working 2 jobs or whatever it is to pay for school. I mean, juggling all that stuff is really, really intense. I know I went back to grad school when I had 3 small children, right? And I was commuting an hour and a half each way as well to school, then go to the university. All right, after work, drive around the car park. It was a big university, 30 or 40,000 students. Drive around the car park, look for a parking spot where I wouldn't get fined. All right. And then get to class, and we had 3-hour classes at that time. So I was always an hour late for class. So that's why I saw the potential for online. My professor was so great. He would hold the class and they'd just do stuff, problems until I got there. Then he'd start the lecture. But so online, all right, has such potential to help students to reach their educational goals. That's why I'm excited and passionate about it. And so thank you so much again tonight. We really appreciate your expertise. We really appreciate your perspective on this, and certainly send us ideas and input on what we can do moving forward. Okay.
So I'm going to be sending out the recording when it's done in Zoom to anybody who's attended, or any of those who might be interested in viewing the recording. And I'm also going to be sending out a certificate. I'm going to be working with our web person, Mike Devine, and getting a certificate, and I'll send that out to you as well. Possibly not this week, but probably, yes, definitely next week. And please reach out to me or Julia if you need anything help. That's why I'm there, for Canvas, to brainstorm, to go through, scenarios, what works, what doesn't, and that's why I'm here. So, and I really love what I do. So thank you. Have a great evening and enjoy your supper.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.